Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Getting Started with Advanced Analytics, Grantek's Analytics Solutions for Manufacturers, powered by Seeq. My name is Sam Russem, and today I'm joined by both Michael and Allison from Seeq, and we have a whole lot to cover, but I always do like to start these out with a couple of simple rules, so let's get that out of the way first. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today, and I want to make sure that you're getting the most out of the webinar. So make sure you're eliminating distractions, set your phone on silent, turn off email notifications, that whole sort of thing. Realistically, I understand distractions might happen. I get it. We are going to be recording this session and sharing it after the webinar, so you can always go back and catch up on something if you missed it. Next, I always do recommend that people take notes on webinars like this. Don't just write down what I'm saying. Again, you can always check that out in the video later if you want, but think about how this could apply to your business, how it might apply to your challenges, any questions that you have. And speaking of those questions, if you have anything you want us to answer during the session, use the chat window over on the side to jot any questions down there. We have Jeff in the background who's recording all those for me and will send us questions at the Q&A session at the end of all this. And finally, as on the topic of participation, we are going to have a couple of polls throughout the webinar as well. So definitely would appreciate your active participation in those. Give us some information and some good talking points to bring up in the open discussion part more towards the end. Okay, so a quick preview of what we're going to go over today. We've broken out our agenda into 6 sections. First, we're going to do a couple of quick introductions, and then we're going to jump straight into our segment on the background of advanced analytics, making sure we're all on the same page and using the same terms, making sure that when I say advanced analytics, you're thinking of the same thing that I'm thinking of. We've also got a quick Seeq demo planned in that section too, so you'll definitely want to check that out. Next, I'm going to go over some of the building blocks that you need to have in place or have a plan for to enable a successful advanced analytics program. Then in section 4, we're going to go over 3 ways that we see manufacturers approach advanced analytics. And we've got a little real world story for each one of those examples on how we've seen manufacturers get started. And then finally, I'll hand things over to Michael to do another deeper dive into Seeq to show why it is a good platform to help with some of these analytics challenges. Finally, in the last section, we're going to do a little time for Q&A. Okay, hope that sounds good. We'll get started with a couple of our introductions. So again, my name's Sam Russem. I am Grantek's Director of Smart Manufacturing. I've been working in the industry for 12 years now, including time in automation programming, MES development, project management, and team leadership. I'm based out of Philadelphia, but I do cover Grantek's smart manufacturing customers globally. And my mission is to bring the promise of smart manufacturing to our customers. And I leverage a lot of resources in my time with industry organizations like MESA and the ISA to do so. So Michael, I'll hand the mic over to you for a little bit and I'll give you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sam. Michael Risse, Vice President, CMO at Seeq. I was one of the founding partners back in 2013. In the beginning, there were 10 of us around a picnic table. There's now 140, 150 Seeq employees in Asia, across the United States, and in Europe. I'm based in Seattle, Washington, lived here for about 30 years. Background is more on the IT side, IT software, both with Microsoft and then with startups in the big data and analytics space. But my focus over the last 7-8 years has been specifically on the intersection of advanced analytics, the innovation in software, with analytics opportunities in vertical markets. For example, exactly what we're focused on here at Seeq.
Awesome, thanks a lot for that, Michael. And we'll get to some of Allison's introductions a little bit later. No, you can introduce yourself. We'll go back to that. We'll introduce Allison a little bit when we get into the Seeq demo in a couple of slides. All right, so next we're going to talk a bit about what advanced analytics actually is, make sure we're all on the same page around the terms that we're going to be using. So analytics, right, is all about turning data into information. Data is that raw, unstructured stuff that we get from sensors and systems and all sorts of things throughout our manufacturing businesses and the actual business processes itself, supply chain, all over the place. We want to take that data and turn it into organized, actionable information. 62 is just a number. 62 degrees Fahrenheit is better, it's a temperature, but you're at 62 degrees Fahrenheit now, but at going risk over 65 degrees, and therefore you're out of control limits and you need to send an operator over to station C to check things out within the next 30 minutes. Well, That's a lot more information with very specific instruction on how to react. And you can see where something like that is very valuable in your manufacturing and controls settings. But I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in that as well, because what I just described is a prescriptive analytic, and that is one of the most complex applications we can be doing. So let's kind of go from the start a little bit here too. Analytics are often described using these 4 different levels or types with increasing complexity and value as we move our way up this pyramid. So descriptive analytics are going to be the most accessible. They're going to describe what's happening right now. They are not very complex and they have some value, but it's kind of old news. Most manufacturers, most of the audience today, I'm going to assume has some tools that they need to understand the current state of affairs, do some basic trending, things like that. The next level is going to be your diagnostic analysis. So that's going to add a layer of context on top of the descriptive analytics to say not what just happened, but why it happened too. After that, we're going to see more of the more recent analytic trends using data from the past and the present to predict the future in predictive analytics, right? This is a much hotter topic in Industry 4.0. Predictive maintenance and reducing unplanned downtime or predicting production results to help supply chain balance their flow, all valuable interconnected Industry 4.0 ideas. And then at the top of the pyramid, we have our prescriptive analytics, right? Which is not only telling you what could happen next, but it's also telling you what actions you might want to take and what you need to do in response to that insight. So this is the most complex type of analytics, but it can really change your entire business and the way that you operate if you do it right and commit to it. Now, as Michael and I were preparing for this webinar, we had some really interesting conversations about this pyramid graphic. And while we find it useful for talking about complexity and accessibility of each type of analytic, we don't think it's necessarily right to say that each layer has to build on the one before it. So predictive maintenance is a really great example of this. There's a lot of purpose-built tools out in the market today that are dedicated to just doing predictive maintenance. And you don't necessarily need some solid foundations in descriptive or diagnostic analytics to get yourself there. So it's useful to acknowledge that there are these different types of analytics and their relative complexity. But if you do have some super valuable use case that is up towards the top end of the pyramid, there is a possibility that you can jump right there. So don't let a lack of maturity on the lower levels dissuade you from having that conversation. And that actually brings us to the first one of those poll questions that I threatened you with at the beginning of this session. So I want to know where in this pyramid most of your work lies today. In your everyday job, are you mostly working with descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive analytics, or something else, or it doesn't necessarily apply for you? So we'll leave the poll up for a little bit, go through and answer your questions. I already see some people throwing in, so thank you so much for that. We'll bring up some more total answers later, though I will say right now, most people seem to be in those lower 2 levels. I've got about 2 answers in the predictive section, but at least 15 in the descriptive and diagnostic sections. So keep on throwing up some answers in there, and we'll come back to that in a couple of slides. So speaking of how great modern advanced analytics is, let's talk about how we've gotten to where we are and how we've opened up the space. So if you look back in the 80s, we're solidly in this Industry 3.0 era of analog sensors and chart recorders, where turning data into actionable information is an extremely manual process. Now, most of my personal work in analytics is kind of more in the historian and Excel era, right? So here things are more digital, more plants have some type of historian, but all the reports that I were writing were generally done in Microsoft Excel. Now we're more in the era of advanced analytics. So the amount of data that we're dealing with has expanded exponentially. We are expected to connect to data in the plant as well as the wider business seamlessly. And sometimes we aren't even doing the analysis ourselves. We might have some training computers and machine learning algorithms to help do it for us. Something like a golden batch curve, something that I'm going to bring up a little bit later, was a pretty significant challenge a couple of years ago. Today, it's just a couple of button clicks away in a tool like Seeq. So our goals generally stay the same throughout the years: reliability and quality improvements, safety, root cause analysis, plant optimization, but the level and rate of improvement increases dramatically as our tools continue to get stronger. I'll also interrupt myself really quickly to talk about the results of the poll. So looking at the poll, we had about 80% of the audience respond. 85%, I can do math, 85% are in the descriptive or the diagnostic phases. It's about an even split between the two of them. I got 10% in predictive, no one in prescriptive. So really interesting results there. So just to kind of benchmark yourself against some of the other participants in the audience today. Okay, and for our next section, I'm going to hand things over to Allison for a little bit, and she is going to introduce herself and then do a little introduction for Seeq. So Allison, take it away.
Thanks, Sam. Sorry, jumped the gun on the intro earlier.
Don't worry about it.
So, hi guys, my name is Allison Buenemann. I am an industry principal for the chemicals industry, specifically with Seeq. I have a background in chemical engineering. I'm specifically the OT to Michael's IT. I came up with ExxonMobil, working in various polymers production processes, and then have since joined Seeq for a couple of years. Previously on our analytics engineering team, working directly with our customers in all industry verticals to help them get the most value out of their time series and contextual data. So today I'll be doing your Seeq demonstration, and during the demonstration we're going to focus on kind of 3 key areas that advanced analytics applications are excelling, to use a little bit of a pun there, excelling beyond the capabilities of previous legacy historian visualization trenders and Microsoft Excel add-ins. So with that, I will jump into the demo. Alrighty, and Sam, can you verify that everything is good on my screen?
There we go, Allison. Now we can see your screen. And Sam, your mic is off.
My mic was off. Yeah, it's much better, Allison. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Technology, it almost works. All right, Allison.
Practice this transition too, everybody.
Alrighty, so to get started on that concept of data access. So you are a manufacturer, you have data in your process data historian, you have data in various contextual databases, various SQL-based sources, lab data, maintenance data, production planning data, and you want to be able to overlay all of that data in a single place so that it is all taken in context to one another. Seeq has the capability to do that through what's called Seeq Cortex layer, and you'll see that on an architecture diagram here in a little bit. But all of those data sources are available for your visualization from this connected data sources up here. So I can immediately see what data sources I'm connected to, the status, the count of items coming from that data source. Now, when I'm ready to access data, all I do is search for the tag or the variable that I'm interested in from this search bar as if I'm doing a Google search. Now I can search for anything with the word temperature in it, or I can restrict the items that I'm returning, filtering by data source, by data type, or by item description. Alternatively, I can use various asset hierarchies coming from either other asset hierarchy systems or built directly in Seeq to navigate down an asset structure and add signal data or condition data that way. I can come and customize my display however I see fit. And then, so once I've got my data access figured out, one of the next really key factors of advanced analytics tools is ease of use of advanced analytics algorithms so that all of your employees don't necessarily have to be data scientists. You're going to put the right tools in the hands of the employees that you already have so that they can apply advanced concepts. So I'm going to look at a little bit more time here, and then I'm going to apply a point and click smoothing algorithm to my temperature signal so that I see just the general trend of temperature increasing and decreasing throughout the day. I can come in and give my new signal that I'm created a name, and I can select the signal I want to interact with, the filtering algorithm that I want to use, and then the smoothing window that I want to smooth over. Anytime I'm using one of these point and click tools, I'm getting a preview of what the output of my calculation is going to look like so that I can adjust my smoothing window as I see fit and get that visual feedback iteratively without even executing the tool. So I'm going to click one more smoothing hour, and then I'm going to execute that. I can quickly go ahead and overlay my two temperature signals together on the same scale and on the same lane. And then I can use that smooth temperature signal that I've got here in some of my downstream calculations. One of the key aspects of advanced analytics applications and what differentiates them from legacy tools like Excel is the ability to add context to your data through identifying different events. So Seeq has point and click tools to do different types of event identification, ranging from limit searches against a specific value or another signal, time-based conditions, custom conditions created by start dates, end dates, or by highlighting a portion of the graph, pattern search, as well as any combination of those. So I'm going to create a quick condition here for when my temperature signal is below 85. And I can just search that smooth temp and look for time periods when it's less than my limit that I've defined. I can tailor this condition if I want to ignore events that are shorter than 30 minutes, or if I want to merge together events that are closer together than 30 minutes apart. And I can click execute. And once I click execute, I'm shown these capsules at the top of my screen, these orange bars, and each of these orange bars is representative of one of these events. So Seeq prides itself on having both a no-code and low-code interface for different users of different skill levels or different preferences to interact with. So what I just showed was a no-code interface for event detection, but we can also jump into what we call Seeq Formula, which is our calculation engine behind all of the point-and-click tools, where we can go into the documentation and look for different types of algorithms. So if I wanted to know anything about combining conditions, let's say I want to do a multiple kind of pattern search. I want to know when this temperature is low, but also when this compressor power is high. I can look at different combination algorithms that I can use, or I can also use simple syntax, just like I would use in Microsoft Excel. So if I come in and I say, I want to know when my smooth temperature variable is less than 85, and my compressor power signal is greater than 30, I can name this my composite condition and then execute that to get a multivariate condition that I've created. And now I've got a new condition here that I can work with. One of the other things that you can do when you've defined events or periods of interest that you want to focus your analysis on is really easily add calculations or different KPIs, metrics, or statistics. So I've got a category of point and click tools that I'll work with for this, where I'm just going to say, I want to take my total energy during each of these events that I've identified. So I'm going to take my compressor power signal and then totalize, or take the definite integral of it over this time period. Again, Seeq being this point and click interface, whoever's doing this calculation doesn't have to know what a definite integral is. They just have to know how to use the interface, and then they can interact with the tool. I'm getting a preview of what the aggregate value of each of these energy consumption during each of these events looks like, and I can execute it to work with. I can leverage some different views in Seeq Workbench. So if I wanted to view a table of data, I've got a table view, I've got XY plot view, as well as I'll show quickly some capabilities of working across assets. So I'm going to zoom in on just the previous day's worth of data here, and I'm going to bounce into what we call tree map view to show how the results of my analysis can quickly be scaled from a single asset across all of the assets in my system. So what I'm looking at here is a visualization showing all of the different areas within my asset tree that I began with, and whether or not that area has one of these events that we've identified present. So whether it's got the high power, low temperature event. I can drill down into these visualizations to see what's going on in that specific asset, and then quickly bounce back to my higher level view just by switching back to tree map view. I talked about wanting to access my data. I talked about wanting a quick and easy way to interact with my different analytics algorithms. Now let's talk about how we can use Seeq for knowledge capture and collaboration. One of the great features of Seeq Workbench is this journal feature that's going to allow users to drop links to specific views at specific points in time. So I can drop what we call a Seeq link to the current work step here of my tree map view. I could go back to my trend view. I could adjust my time scale, take items off of my screen, do whatever I want to this visualization, and then I can always bounce back to that view when I dropped the link by clicking on that link in the journal. And we'll show a fully baked journal here in a second so you can really see that value. The other big mechanism for knowledge capture and collaboration that Seeq has is Seeq Organizer Topic. So this is an example of a multi-level Seeq Organizer Topic with different views for different positions within an organization. We've got a high-level view for a VP of manufacturing, all the way down to a daily monitoring view that might be used by the engineer. These organizer topics can have custom date ranges configured and assigned to the different visualizations within them, and they can also be made to either update live or on a schedule. Let's look at a presentation view of this to see how a user might interact with it in a daily meeting with operations. They can present this on a screen, scroll down, talk about the different items that they're monitoring, and if something warrants further investigation, like let's say that a particular operator is concerned about this heat exchanger trend and wants to dig in further to see if there is something that they could do to project this further out into the future for the maintenance date, we're just going to click on that item and we're going to be taken to a view-only version of the Seeq Workbench where users can interact with not only the data, add additional trend items for context, but they can also interact with the journal. So in this journal, the user who developed this heat exchanger analysis collected his thoughts and his workflow as work steps, and we can just click through the work steps to get an idea of how that particular calculation was developed. So we started with our signals displayed on our screen, performed calculations to identify time periods of interest. Here we've got capsules for time periods when the flow through the exchanger was low, indicating that there was a downtime event present, as well as a longer capsule indicating the duration of this heat exchanger cycle since the last maintenance period. We can use our cleansing algorithms to cleanse the different signals, removing data during downtime that we don't want to use in modeling or predictive analytics. And then finally, we can do calculations. So here we'll reduce the number of variables we're monitoring by calculating the heat transfer coefficient, and then work on modeling that coefficient as a function of days in service and flow through the exchanger. We can then use that value projected into the future to determine when our maintenance period is going to be required. Once I've drilled into this, I've determined everything I needed to from this, I can easily jump back into that high-level dashboard just by clicking the back arrow on my browser, and I'm back to my view. Alternatively, if I'm interested in sharing this with folks via email or printing it for some reason, I can use the PDF option to generate a nice PDF of my report or dashboard to share with my peers. And with that, I will stop sharing and hand it back over to Sam. If there are any questions for me from the demo, please feel free to use the chat.
Muted again. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. I get all I was getting like what's it called? I was looking back on some of my previous experiences at Grantek, looking at that. I get jealous when I look at a tool like this, honestly. So little history on me. So 10 years ago at this time, yeah, probably April of 2011, I was an embedded engineer at a plant for Grantek. I actually went to 2 food and beverage plants back to back where I had a main project that I was doing, but I was also there every day to answer support calls if they came up and kind of do little continuous improvement projects and do things like this to kind of look at the data we had in the historian and figure out where we could make improvements. So much time spent in VLOOKUPs and Excel trying to figure out all this stuff that you just do with a couple of button clicks inside of Seeq. I wish I could go back and do it again. It seems really cool. It's one of the reasons I really like the software. So thanks for reminding me of all that, Allison, and kind of why I get so jealous of the people that actually get to use this in Grantek today. Okay, so next, I'll try to get a little bit less giddy, and we'll talk about how we can evaluate our readiness for analytics. So now you've seen the tool, you've seen a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. Let's make sure that you're ready to jump into something like that, and I think the answer is going to be yes. So, but just a couple of check boxes to go through and evaluate your readiness. Usually, when customers come to me and we start to talk about advanced analytics, there are three things that I like to check on to make sure that they're ready and going to have a good start. I want to look at the maturity of their data availability, their existing analytics tools, and their capacity and plans to change and take action based on any insights they're going to find. So data is the obvious one you need, right? It's where we get this insight from. Data can come from all sorts of sources, especially in a more connected and digital enterprise. So your analytics tools may want to get data from business systems like your ERP and PLM and supply chain systems. It's also going to need data from MES and historians, SCADAs and databases at the plant level. And there may even be value to going down to the individual machine center level, and that might mean pulling data from automation data providers and PLCs and DCSs directly. A couple of other things about, so we're always hearing about big data and the trends towards data lakes. These are those large corporately scoped data storage centers that the goal is to connect to every piece of data in the enterprise and make that available to any analytics tool that's going to need that data, and really to remove any barriers around data access. So powerful trends that supports analytics very heavily. Another Industry 4.0 trend that definitely helps us get the data we need is advances in IoT and edge devices. So these are the technologies that are going to make it a lot easier for us to connect more systems and get more data without necessarily making huge investments into hardware or network infrastructure. They're also really good tools for connecting legacy systems without having to do some massive control upgrades to make sure they can get onto the network. Finally, we got to talk a little bit about data quality and data integrity. So garbage in, garbage out is the mantra. You can't get good, valuable insights from a bunch of bad, inaccurate data. I'm not going to go into that too much, but if you do want to learn more about data quality and data integrity, check out Grantek's YouTube channel. My colleague Brian Hayes and I did a webinar a while back on data integrity in the life sciences industry, and a lot of those principles are going to apply to making sure your data here is good too. Our next readiness category is on analysis tools. So this is making sure you have the resources that you need to convert raw data into valuable information. So of course, software is going to play a huge role in this. No one wants to be doing analysis in paper or Excel anymore. And at the risk of being maybe a little too blunt and obvious, we might suggest Seeq is a really good analytics tool. You should check those guys out. Now, the tools are going to be no help unless you have knowledgeable people who are trained on how to actually use them. So despite the advances in technology and the capability of the tools, there is still a human touch required here to make sure this data is working for you and valuable for you. Which leads me to one of my top tips when it comes to considering analysis tools, which is to be wary of those that claim to be hands-off. There is software out there that promises that if you just give them unlimited access to all of your data, that they have a bunch of machine learning and AI algorithms that will just figure out insights for you automatically. I personally haven't heard a lot of success stories about solutions like that. And I think just the technology isn't there at a price point and an accessibility range that it's ready for mass markets. So you really want to be focusing on empowering your people with new and better tools that they could be using so that they are taking their knowledge of your process and your business cases and your data to come up with the best insights for you. Again, I'm not completely dissuading you. If you really do think you have a good use case that is for one of those hands-off tools, I'm not saying avoid them like the plague. I'm just saying be a little bit careful around things like that. The other thing I'll recommend is just to ask for help. There's a lot of tools out there. Figuring out which ones work and which ones don't can be tough. Feel free to ask for help. Integrators like Grantek, vendors like Seeq, other software, subject matter experts and consultants definitely around and help you and can help you pick out the right tool in the landscape. The last thing that I want to talk about is enabling your company's attitude and process around change. So this type of change, the way that we actually influence our process to in the response to the information we're getting, can take a lot of forms, right? It could be alerting information to people on the shop floor and telling them to take action. While that might not be the full closed loop and automated process that defines manufacturing and Industry 4.0 the future, it's a really great low-hanging fruit, and it gets you immediate value out of your analytics insights. Now, of course, live feedback is a little bit better. I think we're starting to see people get a little bit more comfortable with the idea that we're sending information off-site and having computers and remote systems influence our control decisions, sometimes in a complete closed loop. So that's something that we are seeing more and more of. And finally, of course, projects. Analytics can be a great tool for helping you prioritize what continuous improvement and process change projects are going to be valuable for you, giving you a much better idea of how to prioritize your work, how to improve it, and what kind of value you can expect. Now, the funny thing is that all probably sounds very obvious to you, but that is the step that people miss all of the time. Sometimes it could even be a budgeting issue, right? Where if you're talking about a major process change or project recommended by an analytics tool, you might not have that in your budget at this point, which leads me to my other point, which is don't let perfection be the enemy of improvement. Sure, your analysis tool might say that a major capital project could reduce downtime by 10%, but maybe you don't have the budget for that big capital project this year. And maybe if you get a little creative and say that if we're just alerting operators on the floor of a certain condition, maybe that's not the full 10% reduction, but maybe it's a good 5% reduction to get us started while we wait for the approval of the larger project to come through. So don't get frustrated, be creative in your thinking, and try to think about how you can get the best bang for your buck out of the findings that you have. Okay, so I went over a lot of things to look for, but did not actually how to evaluate your readiness in some of these categories. So I thought it would be nice to kind of suggest a couple of tools to help out with that as well. So first off, don't just discount your own intuition and experience. You've probably got a pretty good idea of your current data analysis and change capabilities. Trust your gut. That could be a really great starting point, and the price is certainly right. If you want something a little bit more formal, I would recommend some guidance from Mesa International or Acatech. So Mesa International has two great tools to help define your current state: their metrics maturity framework and their MOM capabilities maturity model. So the first one, metrics, is all about specific KPIs that you can measure and how you can use more advanced KPIs depending on specific business goals. So if you're focusing on operational efficiency or customer responsiveness or sustainability as a couple of examples, it'll tell you kind of what some basic fundamental metrics would be, and as you continue to get all the value you can out of those, where you can advance to see more value. So really cool tool there. The other one is the MOM maturity model, which is more comprehensive about all level 3 activities around performance, quality, inventory, and maintenance. So this is really good for a more comprehensive smart manufacturing assessment for your company. Finally, if you're looking for a real comprehensive assessment of your entire business and Industry 4.0 maturity, I would recommend something like the Acatech Industry 4.0 Maturity Index to guide you. But you should know that this is about Industry 4.0, which is about more than just manufacturing. So this is really a complete business assessment that's going to include things like looking into your organizational structure and what types of people you hire, not just what types of manufacturing technologies you're adopting. So a couple of different options here. You can see I arranged these from kind of the simplest to the most complex and thorough. Again, all these links are up here. You're welcome and encouraged to go ahead and check those out. But if you do have any questions or need any help with it, you can always reach out to Grantek. You have a line to us, and we have some emails and stuff at the end if you need to get in touch. Which actually brings us to our other poll question. I would be curious to know, where do you think that your company has the most work to do when it comes to readiness? Is it in data availability, in your analysis tools, or in your organization's ability to enact change? While we're getting a couple of answers on that, I thought this might be a good point. I've been talking for a while. Michael, kind of what is your thoughts and what do you see in customers and how they get ready to implement a piece of software like Seeq?
Well, yeah, I think this is a great list in terms of data, analytics, and then enacting change people with respect to the people and employees. What we see is, from a data perspective, it's called DRIP, data rich and information poor. Usually the issue is not that there isn't data or that it isn't well stored in a historian or databases or other resources. The issue is there's too much of it. And sometimes connecting it can be tough, but as you saw earlier with Allison, that's something that Seeq can help with. But the data is typically there. There are cases where they don't have the data. They need some new sensors. They need maybe a direct to cloud pipeline for new data from new sensors to complement their existing infrastructure. But to us, in our experience, that is the exception. So many companies for so long have been putting sensors out. They've got a lot of data. They have DRIP, data rich and information poor. So typically that is in place. The second thing that they have in place typically are engineers with subject matter experts, process engineers, people like Allison, people like yourself, people who know what they wish they could find in the data, but it's too hard, takes too long to get there. And just to be super clear, what Allison was showing, that's everything she showed. Like, she showed a lot of new things that are different or possible in an advanced analytics experience, but the person using that is the same person using Excel. If you can use Excel, you can use Seeq. These are now accessible solutions for you. So we don't see much sort of impact on the people perspective in terms of, as you said earlier, Sam, you don't have to go hire people for this. You don't have to go get a different skill or certification. You just need to use that experience, expertise, education that you have, and get to the third thing, which is the analytics. The gap that we typically see is they've got the data, they've got DRIP, they've got the people. The people are bright, they're motivated, they're experienced. But the earlier point you made, for the last 30 years, the standard operating procedure, when you've got a calculation-based analytic, data gets copied into a spreadsheet, and then the grind begins. So typically, the gap on this slide is not with the data and availability. It's not with the people who are in place and very strong in their skill set. It's the fact that innovation hasn't come yet to the analytics tools that they're trying to use to get those insights out. And case after case, we find customers, it'll take them longer to do the analytic, to find the insight, than it takes for the batch to run, or the process to complete, or the action to be taken, or the decision to be made. And so what's happening is they can't take advantage of analytics because it takes too long to get the insight to make a difference in the outcome. So the data's there, that's the DRIP case. The people are there, they're ready to go. The issue we see is, something new needs to happen in the world, advanced analytics, to get in the hands of the people, to get the insights out of the data and to take the action, improve those outcomes. That's been our experience today. And again, there are times when you might have to get new data, new sensors, new data, but oh my goodness, that's a minority of situations.
Well, and that's one of the things we were talking about before the session too, right, Michael, about how there's probably more data you can get and more insights that you can get from it, but there's probably a lot of insights you can get from the data you already have.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Speaking of insights into data that we have, I got some good results from the poll in, and it's actually not what I expected. I expected to have a bit of a dip in, or I expected a spike around analysis tools, and that was where the real gap would be. To the audience, I want you to know you are split across the board. It was a third, exactly, equal answers on data availability, analysis tools, and enacting change. Interesting. Okay, so really one of our main events for today. So we've talked a lot about analytics, how you make sure you're ready. Now we're ready to get started. How do we get started with advanced analytics? So generally, when manufacturers come to me, they want to talk about analytics. They're looking for one of three things. They either state a specific problem or set of problems that are trying to solve. They have a team of people that are dedicated to continuous improvement or analysis, but they need better tools to get better insights. Or there's just this intuitive feeling. I know we have a bunch of data. I think there's real opportunity in it, but I'm not quite sure where to start in a way that's going to drive the most value for our organization, and I need help. So we take similar but slightly different approaches to each. You either are going to need a solution to solve a specific need, a tool to enable your team, or a service to support your analytics journey. So let's go over some real-world examples of projects that Grantek and Seeq have worked on together for customers that have fallen into each of these categories. So our first example comes from our good friends north of the border in Ontario. This is for a materials manufacturer. They had 12 facilities globally, and they came to us with a specific problem. They were having waste issues that they felt could be avoided. If only they could detect when a product run was drifting away from its ideal batch curve in real time. If they could make corrections in flight, they could see huge savings through waste reduction. So we knew they had the data. It was stored in an ignition historian, and we knew they had the people to make the change. Operators, if informed when they needed to check the process, knew what they needed to do to get a batch into control. Really what they needed was the analysis tool to tell them if there was going to be a problem before it happened. So using our categories from the previous slide, we're looking for a solution to a specific problem. Can I predict if a batch is going to deviate from its golden profile? So let's go over what our solution needed to do. So we needed to define these golden batch profiles for each product they could run, and that was actually thousands of different profiles for each SKU. And then we would need to identify what product was running on the line, select the right golden batch profile for comparison. We would need to compare the active product run to its golden batch in near real time. And if we would predict that an active product run is going to deviate from that golden batch, we're going to notify operators that a deviation is predicted so they can go to the machine and take action. The end resulting system looked kind of like this system you see on the right. So PLCs are controlling the process, getting that data, sending it to the ignition historian, which we would then send to an on-premise Seeq server. Sorry, not send it. Seeq would observe that data. Seeq doesn't actually copy the data in. So Seeq would observe that data and compare the current run to the right golden profile for that SKU. And then we would also use Seeq to predict if there was a real risk that we would go outside of the control area by a certain percentage. And if we detected that, we'd send a signal back to ignition, bring up an alert on the operator SCADA screen, have them take corrective action. And this is working. We're still talking about the wider rollouts to apply this at scale, but it is used and useful every day and saving a lot of potentially wasted product. Next up, we're staying in Canada, but moving over to the pharmaceutical industry. So this is a customer that has an existing continuous monitoring solution in place, but the reporting tools for it were proprietary and a bit restrictive, which was giving their continuous improvement teams a real headache, especially since they felt there was some unplanned downtime they could eliminate if they could do a more thorough analysis on the data they already had. So this customer has the data. They definitely need a tool, and their people are ready for change. They just need some data to confirm it and get things approved. Fun side note on this one, actually. So we were actually originally asked if we could write a set of custom scripts to extract the data from their SQL database and export it to a CSV for analysis in Excel. But when we looked at what it would cost to do that custom solution, and we looked at the cost for what it would take to just implement Seeq, it was a no-brainer to go with Seeq before we even considered all of the other advantages and other data sources that it could connect to. So definitely a good solution here. This is more fitting the tool profile. You might be able to argue this is a solution to a problem too, but really the purpose here was to give a new tool to their teams to go and observe this data. So what did this solution look like? Well, we needed to connect to our continuous monitoring SQL database. There was some reformatting and modeling of that SQL data to turn it into something useful for a time series analysis. It was kind of organized in a very odd table structure. We then need to access and work with continuous improvement monitoring using that advanced analytics tool, and train our team and the customer's team on how to use this data to derive valuable insights from the continuous monitoring data. So this is still an earlier project. We are connected to the database. We're pulling that information in from SQL, and we're starting to work on the actual use case development now that we have all the data in the tool. Our third story is more about Seeq as a service, and this is for a medical device company in the southern USA. This is a company that experienced a very sudden demand increase due to the pandemic. It was all hands on deck to make sure they were producing as optimally as possible and frankly, making materials that we all needed to stay safe. So this is a great example of where something open-ended like Seeq Analytics as a service can really help out a lot. These guys have a ton of data, but everybody's moving at, forgive the joke, warp speed. And any tools that could accelerate the insight and improvement cycle were embraced. So they had some data, but probably not everything that could provide value. There was, once again, no significant analytics tool beyond Excel, and they have a team to implement changes, but those teams are maxed out, and they need any kind of support they can to focus them on the highest priority projects that they could be using. So, as I alluded to already, this all leads to Grantek, Seeq, and this customer working with an analytics solution as a service. So this is actually a really good opportunity for me to talk about the most recommended point of entry for Seeq, which is their proof of value offering. So this is a low cost, low risk way to get started with Seeq and make sure it's the right platform for you. So you get 90 days of Seeq Enterprise, unlimited users and training, connected up to 3 sites, all with all of the options and add-ons that you might need to be successful. In addition to me geeking out a little bit earlier about the tool, this is really one of the things I've always admired about Seeq too. They're willing to let you run wild with the software because they're confident that once you start to use it, it's really going to provide a lot of value to it and become a critical part of your ecosystem. So for this solution, we got them set up with a couple of different things. So a Seeq proof of value, and then we started to investigate their existing data sources and start to pull things in, connecting Seeq to those data sources and start to model that. Training, again, the whole team, Seeq, Grantek, and the customer around ways we could use Seeq and brainstorming potential use cases with the data that's available. And then finally, we're doing regular check-ins with this customer. So controlled collaboration sessions where we all get together and figure out who's going to be working on what analysis or what change, or do we need more analytics experts to look into this specific problem. But we're kind of using a more agile approach to continuously work with the customer and come up with new insights for them. This customer is now out of the proof of value phase and is continuing to use Seeq to improve these operations all the time, every day. Which leads us to our final poll question. Now that we all know a little bit more about Seeq as a solution and a tool and a service, which of those do you think best fits your situation? Do you think that you need that solution? Do you think you need a tool? Do you think you need services? Or do none of these resonate and we might kind of just need to take a combined approach, or something else is going to help you out? So fill in some more answers in there. Oh, thank you, everybody. You're the best. This is a good audience who's like kind of going and actually answering things. So again, I'll keep an eye on that. We'll get some answers in there. And as you're going through and clicking your response, this is a great opportunity to hand things over to Michael to talk about using Seeq to drive results. So I'll control the PowerPoint for you, Michael, but take over whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Sam. This is an intentionally repeated slide. This is like when you get a document and one of the pages says this slide intentionally blank. Well, this slide intentionally repeated. I just think it's such a great summary of what's happening right now with this inflection point, where the way that things have been done for a certain period of time, largely historian data storage and spreadsheet elbow grease, is transitioning. It's transitioning because there's just too much data for that model to work anymore. It's transitioning because there's incredible innovation in the software, machine learning, data analytics solutions that are out there. It's transitioning because, Sam, you mentioned this, an increasing number of customers are leveraging the cloud as a deployment model and for faster access to innovation, something we saw grow dramatically last year, a situation where people were working remotely, people needed innovation, access to innovation more quickly. So there is an inflection point happening from how it's been done to how it's going forward for a number of good reasons. And we are at that inflection point. I think Seeq represents what is on the other side in terms of an advanced analytics solution, with your data where it is and with your users who you are, right? It should be a fairly low impact transition, given the fact that the data can stay where it is and that the users are the users and they can keep working as they have been. And by the way, Sam, I love your comment about the POV and our proof of value model and running wild. I'll just, yes, that's how Seeq works. If you look at our customers, we have hundreds of customers, and with only a couple exceptions, they all started out of proof of values. And when that value was proven, then they expanded. They expanded across their plant, they expanded between plants, they expanded across geographies and across country lines to become users, where in one case, for example, customer has over 10,000 users of Seeq across their organization around the world, right? But they all start with understanding and appreciating, hey, this is going to make our outcomes better with the users that we have and the data where it is, and it grows from there. So this is, I've intentionally repeated. The next slide is, well, okay, we keep talking about the parts of Seeq. Let's put the elephant together. You've seen Seeq Workbench, you've seen Seeq Organizer referred to. You haven't heard of Seeq Data Lab? You heard of Cortex with Allison. This is a quick architecture and overview. The top layer, those are the application experiences. Seeq Workbench was our first product. By the way, it's intentionally green. I should say our first application, it's intentionally green. That's to remind you of Excel. That's to remind you, that's where you're going to do that diagnostic, interactive analysis with your data. Organizer, that's where you're going to publish, by the way. Blue, like Word, this is where you're going to go to assemble your analytics for publication, dashboards, web pages, PDFs, and otherwise. And then finally, Seeq Data Lab. We didn't get to that today. It's part of our Seeq Enterprise offering, but that is a Python notebook with a Jupyter Seeq, it's a Jupyter notebook with a Python Seeq library, I'll get that right, that enables you to access any Python script and thus any machine learning library that you'd happen to want to access. Now, younger generation of process engineers, folks like Allison, very comfortable moving from Workbench into Data Lab. For some organizations where Seeq has grown and we're interacting between OT and IT departments, that's also where data scientists can come in, IT-based data scientists can come in to participate with process engineers and process engineering data to build better outcomes. So those are the applications experiences. Cortex is the server. It's our calculation engine that Allison mentioned. It's how we get the connectivity to those underlying data sources. It's where our security and administration tools sort of reside. So all of these have one security and admin infrastructure, so you can lock it down and control who gets what. And then there's the data sources, right? And the key thing for Seeq deployability and low impact that I mentioned, Seeq connects to your data sources. Seeq does not move or copy data. You don't have to change your data before you connect to your data. So completely typical, working with Grantek, you're going to get Seeq installed and connected to your data sources. Allison mentioned this. Seeq will index your data sources so you can search like Google on the tag names or use the asset tree if you have one. For example, with OSIsoft PyAF. Then some training, some interaction training and how to use Seeq. Again, if you can use Excel, you can use Seeq. And then you're into the analytics, right? And that very low touch, low impact model of your data being okay where it is and getting started quickly. I mean, that puts Seeq in, from an ROI perspective, in the category of ROI within a day or days, as opposed to, months, quarters, years, or something like that. And of course, you can run Seeq. The best experience with Seeq is when we run it for you as a SaaS application. We support both AWS and Azure. So regardless of sort of your organization's disposition on the cloud, we should have you covered with one of those two. So that's the sort of the big picture of Seeq. And on the next slide, I absolutely promise I won't go through this in detail. Let me just say, there's a lot of you here on the call. There's a lot of you from different industries. Seeq has references and case studies in your industry. The big three for us, oil and gas, pharmaceutical, and chemical. But we've got water from Tasmania, the island off the coast of Australia, across the United States all the way to Europe, if water is your industry, or consumer packaged goods, food and bev, power generation. We cover various industries with specific use cases in those industries. And if it happens to be chemicals, you might run into Allison again, because she is, as she said earlier, the industry principal for the chemical industry. And across these industries, variety of types of analytics. And Sam did a great job of going through these different analytics types that exist, whether they're simple diagnostic or predictive or prescriptive and so forth. So by use case, by vertical, Seeq has applicability to assist you in more rapidly finding insights you can take actions on, leveraging this new generation of advanced analytics capabilities and innovation. So that's a very quick And I promise we're 55 minutes into this. I'm not taking more of your time. We won't go into every detail, but if there's a dot or there's a square on the slide, we'll have a use case that we can discuss and Grantek can provide to you as a specific example for what you're interested in. So Sam.
Yeah, no, that great overview, Michael. And I think, the other thing I want to mention before we leave this slide is I do think that this really reinforces what we had mentioned a while ago when we were looking at the pyramid, right? Around how you don't necessarily, even though, heat exchanger maintenance prediction is in that high level predictive or, the prescriptive categories over here, they're not necessarily built on earlier technologies. There is the possibility to jump over to those with the right use case. So, would you believe that I timed this out and thought we were going to have a lot of time for questions and answers? It looks like we are definitely a little bit behind schedule. I will answer the easiest question I see in the chat first. So, yes, the recording of this session will be made available. So, I believe that Jeff or somebody from the Grantek marketing team will be reaching out to all of you after this, making sure that everybody has the information that they need. Speaking of, I will quickly throw up this slide. You can always find out more about either of our companies at grantek.com or seeq.com. And it's actually really easy to find out more information from either of us because both of us is just info at the company, Seeq or Grantek.com. I might also say, so when we did the poll earlier about what solution path do you think is going to fit your team the best, actually, no one responded. They had a solution to a specific problem they were looking for. Interesting. We got about 30% saying they wanted a tool to enable their team, 50% saying they had wanted some services to help find and fix the high-value problems, but a good quarter of the people said that there was something else. So if you're one of those something else people, I would really appreciate hearing from you because I want to make sure that we're teeing these solutions and making easy buttons for as many situations as we can. So if you answered something else on that question, I'd really appreciate it. Email to info@grantek.com. You know me personally and have my email. Go ahead and send it to me directly if you'd like, but I'd love to hear from you to figure out more about your potential use cases. So again, thanks for the great participation on the polls, everybody. Let's see if I can get to a question or two in here as well. Okay, so I see one from Barry that I think I will answer. Barry asked, how do you find the live feedback process changes, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, work within a life sciences manufacturing plant, especially with their high levels of validation and change control? So I get to give my favorite consulting-y answer to this, which is, of course, that it depends. But really, I mean that to say different life sciences companies have different tolerances and policies around change control and the way that we implement changes. So we did have a couple of examples from life sciences companies and the way that we've used analytics with them before. So it's definitely possible, but change control and validation absolutely needs to be a part of the conversation, and they should be a part of the team that is reviewing these insights and hearing about the potential corrective actions and talking about kind of what to do for next steps. I'd say the biggest difference that I usually see in life sciences compared to something like a food and beverage or a CPG is that they're more likely to have, because of that change control and validation, you're more likely to have a project as the follow-up from one of these things as opposed to kind of an ad hoc change on the floor to make sure that you're doing the proper change control and things like that in the process as well. So there's a quick answer for Barry on that one. Let's see. Actually, I think I have another question or two. I have one for the Seeq team. So Michael or Allison, if you could jump in on this one. I had a question around how does Seeq work with categorical data as opposed to time series data? Any quick thoughts on that? And then we'll wrap up for the day.
Categorical data in a few different ways. Oftentimes the categorical data does have a timestamp in the form of like an event, like a batch database. You'll have your batch ID and then you'll have information associated with it. I think in Seeq Data Lab also we see a lot of users introducing categorical data overlaid with their time series data. And in those environments, they're more looking for multivariate relationships rather than time series strictly.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. All right, everybody. Well, we are just about at time. Certainly not enough time left to take another question, but I see a couple in there, mostly from people that I know, so I can actually reach out to you. But again, reach out to us at info@grantek.com or to me personally if you do have any questions, or info@seeq.com if you have a question directly to Seeq. You don't need to go through me. But we will call it there for the day. As always, thank you everybody so much for joining and for your time today. Stay tuned, follow us on LinkedIn and on our websites and things like that. We're doing events like this all the time, and we definitely appreciate your participation. So thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you, Sam.